Jake Martinez walked through the dark hallways deep inside Station Nexus 7. His work boots made quiet sounds on the metal floor. He carried his tool bag and a small light that showed him the way. It was 3 a.m, and everyone else was sleeping. Jake liked working the night shift. Nobody bothered him down here in the old parts of the station. He could fix broken machines and check power lines without people asking him questions or telling him what to do. He had been doing this job for 5 years now. He knew every corner of these forgotten places. The station was huge. It floated in, space near the Centauri system. Ships came here from all over the galaxy to trade goods and fuel. Most people stayed in the bright upper levels with shops and restaurants. They never came down to where Jake worked. Down here it was just old machinery and empty rooms that nobody used anymore. Tonight, Jake was checking the detention block. This place used to hold alien prisoners during the war with the Zephyrians 3 years ago. The war was over now, and this area had been empty ever since. But the machines still needed to work in case they ever used these rooms again. Jake walked past rows of old cells. The doors were all open. Dust covered everything. His light showed scratches on the walls where prisoners had marked the days. It made him feel sad to see it. War was a terrible thing. He stopped walking. He thought he heard something. Jake stood very still and listened. There it was again. A soft sound, like singing. It was coming from deeper in the detention block. Jake felt confused. Nobody was supposed to be down here. Maybe it was just the air system making noise. Old machines sometimes sounded strange, but this did not sound like a machine. It sounded like a person singing a gentle song. He followed the sound through more hallways. The singing got louder as he walked. Jake's heart began to beat faster. If someone was down here, they were not supposed to be. He should call security. But something made him keep walking toward the sound. The singing stopped. Jake waited, but he did not hear it again. He was about to turn around and leave when he saw a light coming from under a door. A real door, not an open cell. Someone had closed this door and put something inside. Jake walked closer. The door had a small window, made of thick glass. He pointed his light at it and looked inside. What he saw made him drop his tool bag. Inside the cell sat a female alien. She had blue-silver skin that seemed to shine in the dim light. Her eyes were large and bright, but they looked tired and sad. She was very thin, like she had not eaten enough food for a long time. In her arms, she held a small child. The child had the same blue-silver skin and large eyes. It looked like it was sleeping. The female alien saw Jake looking through the window and pulled the child closer to her chest. Fear filled her eyes. Jake knew what she was. She was a Zephyrian. But that was impossible. All the Zephyrian prisoners had been released or moved to other places when the war ended. There should not be any aliens left in these cells. The cell was very cold. Jake could see frost on the walls. The alien wore old, torn clothes that did not keep her warm. She had only one thin blanket to cover herself and her child. In the corner of the cell, Jake saw a few empty food containers and a small cup for water. Jake stared at the alien mother and child. How long had they been here? Who had locked them in this freezing cell and then forgotten about them? His mind tried to understand what he was seeing. The alien woman started to sing again. It was the same gentle song Jake had heard before. She sang to the child in her arms, rocking back and forth. Even though she was scared and cold and hungry, she was trying to comfort her baby. Jake felt something break inside his chest. This was wrong, so very wrong. Nobody should be left alone like this, especially not a mother with a small child. It did not matter that she was an alien. It did not matter that there had been a war. This was not right. He tried to open the cell door, but it was locked. The lock was old but strong. Jake would need special tools to open it. He looked through the window again and saw the alien woman watching him. She looked ready to fight if he tried to hurt her child. Jake put his hand on the glass. The alien woman stared at him. He tried to look kind and safe. He pointed to himself and said his name slowly. "Jake," he said. Then he pointed to her and made a questioning face. The alien woman did not answer for a long time. Then, in a voice that sounded like music, she whispered, "Lyra." Jake smiled at her. "Lyra," he repeated. Then he pointed to the sleeping child. "Nix," she said quietly. Jake nodded. Lyra and Nix. He would remember those names. He looked at the empty food containers, again then back at Lyra's thin face. She was starving. They both were. Jake picked up his tool bag and pointed down the hallway. He held up one finger to tell her to wait. Then he tapped his chest and pointed back toward her. He was trying to tell her he would come back. Lyra did not understand all of his hand signals, but she could see that he was not trying to hurt them. She nodded slowly. Jake ran back through the dark hallways toward the main part of the station. His mind was racing. He had found something impossible and terrible. 2 people had been left to die slowly in the cold, forgotten depths of the station. But now Jake knew they were there. And Jake Martinez was not the kind of man who could know about suffering and do nothing about it. Tomorrow night he would come back with food, water, and warm blankets. He would find a way to open that cell door. He did not know what would happen after that, but he knew one thing for sure. Lyra and Nix would not spend another night cold and hungry if he could help it. The next night, Jake came back to the detention block with a backpack full of supplies. He had spent all day thinking about Lyra and Nix. He could not focus on his regular work. All he could see in his mind was that thin, alien mother holding her hungry child in that freezing cell. Jake had taken food from his own kitchen: bread, fruit, some cooked meat, and bottles of clean water. He also brought 2 thick blankets from his apartment and a small electric heater that he had fixed last week. The heater was old, but it would make the cell warmer. When he reached the cell door, Jake looked through the window. Lyra was awake, sitting in the same spot. She still held Nix close to her. When she saw Jake, she did not look as scared as before. She watched him carefully as he put down his backpack and pulled out his tools. It took Jake 20 minutes to break the lock on the cell door. The metal was old and rusty, which helped. When the door finally opened, Lyra moved back against the far wall. She was ready to protect her child if Jake tried to hurt them. Jake stayed by the door. He did not want to scare her more. Slowly, he took the food and water out of his backpack. He put everything on the floor near the door, then stepped back. "Food," Jake said, pointing to the bread and meat. "Water." He made drinking motions with his hand. Lyra stared at the food. Jake could see how much she wanted it, but she was still afraid. This could be a trap. Maybe he wanted something bad in return. Jake sat down on the floor outside the cell. He broke off a piece of bread and ate it to show her it was safe. Then he pushed the rest of the food closer to her and backed away again. After a long moment, Lyra moved forward. She grabbed the water first and drank deeply. Then she tore off small pieces of bread and meat and ate them quickly. She was so hungry that her hands shook. While Lyra ate, Jake set up the small heater in the corner of the cell. He had brought a long power cord that reached to an outlet in the hallway. Soon, warm air began to fill the cold space. Nix woke up and made small sounds. Lyra gave him tiny pieces of soft bread soaked in water. The child ate eagerly. Jake could see that Nix was too thin, just like his mother. "How long?" Jake asked, holding up his fingers to show time passing. Lyra did not understand at first. Jake tried again. He pointed to the cell, then to Lyra and Nix, then made his fingers walk to show days and months passing. Lyra held up 3 fingers. Then she made motions like the sun rising and setting many times. 3 years. Jake felt sick. They had been locked in this freezing cell for 3 whole years. How had they survived? How had nobody known they were here? Lyra finished eating and looked much better. The warm air from the heater was making the cell comfortable for the first time in years. She pointed to Jake and said something in her own language. It sounded like a question. "Jake," he said again, pointing to himself. Then he pointed to her. "Lyra?" She nodded. "Lyra," Then she pointed to her sleeping child. Nix. Jake smiled. Nice to meet you, Lyra and Nix. Lyra tried to copy his words. Nice. Meet Jake. Her voice was musical, even when she spoke human, words badly. Over the next hour, Jake tried to learn more about their situation. Using simple words and hand signals, Lyra told him pieces of her story. She had been captured during the war. Her mate, Nix's father, was dead. When the war ended, everyone forgot about them. They had been living on old food scraps and water from a broken pipe. Jake felt angry. How could the station authorities lose track of prisoners? How could they just forget that real people were locked in these cells? But he also felt something else. He felt glad that he had found them. Now he could help. Before Jake left that night, he gave Lyra both blankets and showed her how to use the heater safely. He promised to come back the next night with more food. Lyra watched him go with something new in her large eyes. Hope. For the next 2 weeks, Jake visited Lyra and Nix every night. He brought food, clean clothes that he bought in the station shops, and medicine when Nix had a small fever. He also brought books with pictures to help Lyra learn human words. Lyra was very smart. She learned new words quickly and began to tell Jake more about her life before the war. She had been a scientist who studied air and atmosphere. She knew how to make the air in buildings clean and safe for people to breathe. Her mate, Keld, had been a pilot who flew ships between planets. Jake learned that Zephyrians were not the monsters that human soldiers had called them during the war. They were just people trying to live their lives. Lyra loved her son and missed her dead mate. She worried about the future and wanted Nix to be safe and happy. She was just like any human mother. Nix was getting stronger and more playful as he ate better food. He started to smile when he saw Jake coming. The little boy learned to say Jack friend in his musical voice. It made Jake's heart feel warm every time. But Jake was not the only person on the station who noticed things. Chief Paul Dawson, the head of security, was a careful man who watched for anything unusual. He had seen the war up close and lost many friends fighting Zephyrians. He did not trust aliens and he did not like mysteries. Dawson noticed that power use in the old detention block had gone up. Someone was using electricity down there when nobody was supposed to be in those areas. He also noticed that Jake Martinez was working longer hours and going to parts of the station that were not on his regular job list. Dr. Lisa Grant, the station's doctor who studied alien biology, noticed something else. Medical supplies were disappearing from storage. Small amounts of medicine and vitamins that would be good for aliens, not humans. Someone was taking them without permission. One night, as Jake was leaving the detention block after visiting Lyra and Nix, he saw security cameras that he had never noticed before. Chief Dawson was watching the old areas more carefully now. Jake felt worried. How long could he keep this secret? The next morning, Jake could not sleep. He kept thinking about what would happen if Dawson found Lyra and Nix. The chief was not a cruel man, but he followed rules very strictly. He would probably put Lyra in a proper prison and send Nix to some alien refugee center on another planet. They would be separated forever. Jake realized that he needed help. He could not take care of Lyra and Nix by himself much longer. But who could he trust? Most people on the station still had bad feelings about the war. They would not want to help aliens, even a mother and child who had done nothing wrong. That night, when Jake visited the cell, Lyra could see that he was worried. She had learned enough human words to ask simple questions. "Jake sad?" she asked. "Problem?" Jake nodded. He tried to explain about Chief Dawson and the security cameras. Lyra understood enough to know they were in danger of being discovered. "Jake helped Lyra, Nix," she said slowly. "Lyra helped Jake. Family now. Family." Jake had not thought about it that way, but she was right. Over these past weeks, he had started to care about Lyra and Nix like they were his own family. He would do anything to keep them safe. But keeping them safe was going to require more than just one man with a tool bag and a kind heart. Jake needed to find other people who would see Lyra and Nix as he saw them, not as aliens or enemies, but as people who deserved help. The question was, did such people exist on Station Nexus 7? Jake decided to trust Danny Torres first. Danny worked in the communications center, managing messages between the station and ships. He was young, maybe 25 years old, with a friendly face and quick smile. Jake had fixed computers in Danny's office many times over the years. Jake knew that Danny had lost his older brother in the war. His brother had been a soldier who died fighting Zephyrians on a planet far away. But Danny never talked about the war with anger. He just looked sad when it came up in conversations. One evening, Jake found Danny working alone in the communications center. Most of the day shift workers had gone home. Jake checked to make sure no one else was around, then closed the door behind him. "Danny, I need to tell you something important," Jake said. "But you have to promise not to tell anyone else until I finish the whole story." Danny looked surprised. Jake was usually quiet and never asked for help with anything. "Okay, Jake, what's going on?" Jake told Danny everything, about finding Lyra and Nix in the freezing cell, about bringing them food and blankets for weeks, about how they had been forgotten and left to die slowly. Danny listened without saying anything, but his eyes got wider as the story went on. "You're taking care of a Zephyrian mother and child?" Danny asked when Jake finished. "Down in the old detention block?" "Yes," Jake said. "I know it sounds crazy, but Danny, you should see them. Lyra's just trying to take care of her son. Nix is a little boy who likes to play and laugh. They're not dangerous, they're just people who got left behind." Danny was quiet for a long time. Jake waited, hoping his friend would understand. Finally, Danny spoke. "My brother died fighting Zephyrians," he said slowly. "For a long time I hated all of them. But a mother and child who have been locked up for 3 years? That's not right, that's not what Tom died for." Jake felt relief wash over him. "Will you help me?" "What do you need?" Jake explained about Chief Dawson watching the detention block more carefully. He needed people who could help bring supplies without being noticed. He also needed people who could make sure Lyra and Nix stayed healthy and safe. Danny agreed to help. The next night, he came with Jake to meet Lyra and Nix. Danny was nervous, but when he saw how thin they were and how scared Lyra looked, his fear turned to sympathy. When little Nix smiled at him and tried to say, "Dan friend," Danny's heart melted completely. "We need more help," Danny said as they walked back from the detention block. "I know someone who might understand." Danny was thinking about Susan Walsh, a teacher who ran the small school on the station. Many families lived on Nexus 7, and their children needed education. Susan was kind and smart, and she had always said that children were the most important thing in any society. It took Danny 3 days to work up the courage to approach Susan. He found her in her classroom after school, cleaning up art supplies that the children had used to make pictures of spaceships and planets. "Susan, can I ask you something?" Danny said. "If you found out that a child was being hurt or neglected, what would you do?" Susan stopped cleaning and looked at him seriously. "I would help that child, no matter what." "Why do you ask?" Danny told her about Lyra and Nix. Susan listened with growing anger and sadness. When Danny finished, she was quiet for a moment. "A 2-year-old child has been locked in a freezing cell for 3 years, she asked. "That's horrible, of course I'll help." Susan became their third ally. She was good at getting supplies without attracting attention. She also started teaching Nix basic words and numbers during the evenings. The little boy was very smart and loved learning new things, but they needed medical help. Nix was healthier now that he was eating good food, but he was still small for his age. Lyra had scars on her arms from trying to stay warm in the cold cell. They needed someone who understood alien biology. Jake thought about Ben Carter, a medical technician who worked with Dr. Grant in the station's hospital. Ben was quiet like Jake, but he was known for being gentle with patients. Jake had seen him taking extra time to help people who were scared or in pain. Jake decided to take a risk. One day he went to the medical center and asked to speak with Ben privately. He told Ben that he had found injured people who needed help but could not come to the hospital for legal reasons. "What kind of legal reasons?" Ben asked. Jake took a deep breath. They're aliens who were supposed to be released after the war, but they got forgotten in the system. If the authorities find them now, they might get sent away from each other. Stared at Jake. Are you talking about Zephyrians? A mother and her young son. They've been living in terrible conditions. They need medical care, but they need it secretly. Ben was quiet for a long time. Finally, he said, "Bring me to see them. If they really need medical help, I'll do what I can." That night, Ben came with Jake, Danny, and Susan to the detention block. When he saw Lyra and Nix, his medical training took over. He could see the signs of long-term hunger and cold exposure. He checked them both carefully and gave Lyra vitamins and medicine for some skin problems caused by the poor conditions. "They'll both be okay," Ben told the group later. "But that little boy should be bigger and stronger for his age. 3 years of poor food and cold weather hurt his growth. And the mother, she's been giving most of her food to her son. She almost died keeping him alive." Ben became their fourth ally. He brought proper medicine and made sure Lyra and Nix stayed healthy. They also added Amy Rogers to their group. Amy worked with computers and data files. She was Susan's friend and had noticed that Susan was spending money on extra food and supplies. When Susan told her the truth, Amy immediately wanted to help. Amy was good at hiding their activities in the station's computer systems. When Chief Dawson looked at power usage reports, Amy made sure the numbers looked normal. When anyone checked supply records, Amy covered the missing items by spreading the costs across many different departments. For 2 months, their secret group took care of Lyra and Nix. The cell became a warm, comfortable place. Lyra learned to speak human words much better. She helped Jake solve problems with the station's air systems using her scientific knowledge. Nix grew stronger and happier. He learned songs from Susan and played games with everyone who visited. Jake was amazed by how much Lyra knew about science. She could look at broken machines and immediately understand what was wrong. She had ideas for making the station's air cleaner and the power systems more efficient. She was not just someone they were helping. She was helping them back. But their secret was getting harder to keep. Chief Dawson was asking more questions about unusual activities in the lower levels. Dr. Grant was investigating the missing medical supplies more carefully. Other people on the station were starting to notice that Jake, Danny, Susan, Ben, and Amy were spending a lot of time together. The crisis came when Nix got very sick. One evening, Jake found the little boy burning, with fever. Lyra was crying and holding him, trying to cool him down with wet clothes. But Nix was getting worse, and their simple medicines were not helping. "He needs real medical care," Ben said after checking Nix. "This is some kind of Zephyrian childhood illness. I don't have the right medicine here. He needs to go to the hospital." "If we take him to the hospital, everyone will know about them," Susan said. "If we don't take him to the hospital, he might die," Ben replied. Jake looked at Lyra, who was holding her sick child and looking terrified. She could not understand all of their human words, but she knew Nix was in danger. Jake made the hardest decision of his life. "We take him to the hospital. We'll worry about everything else later." As Ben carried the unconscious Nix toward the medical center, followed by Jake and the others, none of them knew that Chief Dawson was watching from the security center. The cameras had caught them leaving the detention block with what looked like a sick alien child. Their secret was about to become very public, and everything they had worked for was in danger. Dr. Lisa Grant was working the night shift in the medical center when Jake ran through the doors carrying a small, unconscious child with blue-silver skin. Behind him came Ben Carter, Susan Walsh, Danny Torres, and Amy Rogers. Following them was a female Zephyrian who was crying and reaching for the child. Dr. Grant stared in shock. She had not seen a Zephyrian in 3 years, not since the last war prisoners were transferred off the station. But her medical training kicked in immediately. A sick child needed help, no matter what species they were. "Put him on the examination table," Dr. Grant said quickly. She began checking Nix's temperature and heartbeat while asking rapid questions. "How long has he been like this? What are his symptoms?" "High fever since this morning," Ben said. "Getting worse fast. He's been living in poor conditions for years. Malnutrition, cold exposure." Dr. Grant worked quickly, running tests on Nix's blood and checking his vital signs. The little boy was very sick. While she worked, Jake tried to explain their situation. "Doctor, I know this looks bad, but please listen," Jake said. "This is Lyra and her son Nix. They were forgotten in the old detention block after the war ended. We found them starving and freezing. We've been taking care of them." Dr. Grant kept working on Nix while she listened. "Forgotten? For 3 years? Nobody knew they were there," Susan said. "They were left to die slowly." Lyra stood beside the toys holding Nix's small hand. She spoke to Dr. Grant in broken human words. "Please help, baby, please save Nix." Dr. Grant looked at Lyra's desperate face, then at the sick child on her table. Whatever the political situation was, she had a patient who needed care. She gave Nix medicine for his fever and started treating what she recognized as a common Zephyrian childhood illness. "He'll be okay," Dr. Grant told Lyra. "The medicine will help him feel better soon." But their crisis was just beginning. Chief Paul Dawson had been watching the security cameras when he saw Jake's group leaving the detention block. Now he was walking quickly toward the medical center with 2 security guards. Dawson burst through the medical center doors just as Dr. Grant was making Nix more comfortable. He saw the Zephyrian child on the table, Lyra standing beside him, and Jake's group trying to explain to the doctor. "What is this?" Dawson demanded. "Jake Martinez, you're under arrest for harboring illegal aliens. Everyone else, step back from the aliens immediately." "Chief, please let me explain," Jake said. "There's nothing to explain. These are enemy aliens who should have been processed years ago. You've been hiding criminals." Dr. Grant stepped between Dawson and Lyra. "Chief, this woman and child are my patients. They're not going anywhere until the boy is healthy." Dawson looked angry. "Doctor, these aliens are a security risk. They need to be contained immediately. They're a starving mother and sick child who need medical care," Dr. Grant replied firmly. While they argued, Jake tried to get closer to Lyra. He could see how scared she was. Security guards were surrounding them, and everyone was talking loudly. Nix was starting to wake up on the medical table. "It's okay, Lyra," Jake said quietly. "We'll figure this out." But Dawson was calling for backup and ordering his guards to arrest Jake's entire group. Within minutes, the medical center was full of security personnel. Commander Helen Ross, the station's leader, arrived to see what was causing all the commotion. Commander Ross was a smart woman who had managed the station for 10 years. She could see immediately that this situation was very complicated. The war with the Zephyrians had been over for 3 years, and peace negotiations were still happening between humans and Zephyrians in other parts of the galaxy. "Chief Dawson, explain what's happening here," she ordered. Dawson told his version of the story. He said that Jake had been secretly harboring dangerous aliens and stealing station supplies. He wanted all of them arrested immediately. Then Dr. Grant spoke up. She explained Nix's medical condition and how undernourished both Zephyrians were. "Commander, these people have been living in terrible conditions for years. They're not dangerous. They're victims." Susan Walsh found her courage and stepped forward. "Commander Ross, I've been teaching the little boy. He's smart and kind. He just wants to learn and play like any child." Danny Torres also spoke up. "My brother died in the war, but he died fighting soldiers, not children. This isn't right." "Commander." Ross looked at Lyra, who was still holding Nix's hand as he slowly woke up. The Zephyrian woman looked terrified but was trying to be brave for her son. "Can she speak our language?" Commander Ross asked. "Yes," Jake said. "Lyra, tell the commander your name." Lyra looked at Commander Ross with her large, bright eyes. In her musical voice, she said, "I am Lyra. This is son Nix. We no hurt anyone. We just want Nix safe." Commander Ross felt a chill as she realized what had happened. Somehow, during the chaos of ending the war and releasing prisoners, this woman and child had been completely forgotten. They had spent 3 years locked in a freezing cell, slowly dying, while the station continued its normal operations above them. "How long were you in the detention block?" Commander Ross asked. Lyra held up 3 fingers. 3 years, cold. 3 years hungry. "Jake friend, find us." Jake, friend, help. The room became very quiet. Everyone was trying to understand how such a thing could happen. How do you lose track of a mother and child for 3 whole years? Commander Ross knew. This was a disaster. If news got out that the station had accidentally imprisoned a Zephyrian family for 3 years after the war ended, it would cause huge problems. The peace negotiations between humans and Zephyrians could be destroyed. Both governments would be angry and embarrassed. But she also knew that Jake and his friends had done the right thing. They had found people who were suffering and had helped them, even though it was risky. Over the next few hours, more complications arose. Amy Rogers showed Commander Ross the computer records that proved Lyra and Nix had been forgotten in the system. The records showed they should have been released or transferred 3 years ago, but somehow the order was never carried out. Dr. Grant's medical report showed how badly Lyra and Nix had been treated by being locked in cold, poor conditions for so long. Without Jake's help, they would probably have died within a few more months. News of the situation began to spread through the station. People heard that a human maintenance worker had secretly been taking care of an alien family for months. Some people were angry. They said Jake was a traitor who had helped the enemy, but other people were impressed by his kindness. The story reached the communication systems and began spreading to other stations and planets. Soon, people across human space were hearing about Jake Martinez and his secret rescue of Lyra and Nix. Commander Ross faced an impossible choice. She could arrest Jake and his friends to show that humans followed their own laws strictly. But that would mean punishing people who had saved lives and helped those who had been forgotten by the system. She could also recognize Jake's actions as heroic and right. But that would mean admitting that the station had made a terrible mistake that almost killed innocent people. As she struggled with this decision, something unexpected happened. Messages started coming in from all over human space. Regular people who had heard the story were sending support for Jake. They said he was a hero who represented the best of humanity. The story was becoming bigger than just one space station. It was becoming a symbol of whether humans could show mercy and kindness to those who needed help, even if they were different. Commander Ross realized that her decision would affect much more than just the people in her medical center. It would show the galaxy what kind of people humans really were. 3 days after Nix was brought to the medical center, a formal hearing was held to decide what would happen to Jake and his friends. Commander Ross had set up the hearing in the station's main meeting room. Officers from the Colonial Council had arrived by fast ship to deal with the situation. Jake sat at a table with Danny, Susan, Ben, and Amy. They all looked worried, but determined. Across the room, Chief Dawson sat with the station's legal officer. He still believed they should all be punished for breaking the law. Lyra sat in the front row with Nix, who was feeling much better after Dr. Grant's treatment. The little boy looked around the big room with curious eyes. He did not understand why everyone looked so serious, but he stayed close to his mother. The hearing officer was Captain Robert Hayes from the Colonial Council. He was a stern man who had fought in the war against the Zephyrians. Many people expected him to be harsh with Jake's group. Captain Hayes began by reading the charges. Jake Martinez and his associates are accused of harboring illegal aliens, theft of station property, and violating security protocols. Then he asked to hear testimony from all sides. Chief Dawson spoke first. He explained how Jake had broken many rules and put the station at risk by hiding aliens in the detention block. Dr. Grant testified about the medical condition of Lyra and Nix when they were brought to her. She showed pictures of the freezing cell where they had been living and explained how they would have died without help. Susan Walsh talked about teaching Nix and seeing how smart and gentle he was. Danny Torres spoke about how his brother would have wanted him to help innocent people, even if they were former enemies. But the most important testimony came from Lyra herself. With Jake's help translating the words she did not know, Lyra told her story to the hearing officer and to the cameras that were broadcasting across human space. "My name is Lyra Kethlar," she said in her musical voice. "Before the war, I was scientist. I studied air, how to make it clean for people to breathe. My mate Keld was pilot. We had peaceful life studying and working." She paused and looked at Nix, then continued. "When war came, I was captured trying to save children from bombed building. They put me in cell with baby Nix. War ended, but nobody remembered we were there. Lyra's voice got stronger as she spoke. For 3 years we were cold, hungry, forgotten. I sang to Nix so he would not be afraid. I gave him my food so he would live. I thought we would die in that dark place. She looked directly at Jake. Then Jake friend found us. He brought food, brought warmth, brought hope. Jake and friend saved our lives when system forgot we existed. Lyra stood up from her chair. Jake friend and human friends not break law to be bad. They break law to be good. They save life. They show what humans truly are. Not just strong in war, but strong in kindness. The room was completely silent as Lyra sat back down. Even Captain Hayes looked moved by her words. Then something unexpected happened. Messages started appearing on the hearing room's communication screens. They were coming from all over human space, from other stations, planets, ships, and colonies. The messages were from regular human citizens who had been watching the hearing. They were calling Jake a hero. They said he represented the best values of humanity. Military veterans wrote that they had fought the war to protect human values like protecting the innocent, and Jake had honored those values. One message came from the family of Danny's brother Tom, who had died in the war. They wrote, "Tom died fighting for human values of justice and protection of the innocent. Danny Torres honored his brother's memory by helping Lyra and Nix." More messages kept coming. Teachers wrote about how they would tell Jake's story to their students as an example of moral courage. Parents wrote that they wanted their children to grow up to be like Jake, people who help others even when it's difficult. Captain Hayes read several messages aloud, then looked at Jake. "Mr. Martinez, do you understand what you started here?" Jake looked confused. "Sir, I just helped people who needed help, that's all." "That's all?" Captain Hayes smiled slightly. "Mr. Martinez, your actions have reminded the entire human space community about who we are and what we stand for. You've shown that our greatest strength isn't our weapons or our technology. It's our ability to see suffering and choose to help, no matter who is suffering." Captain Hayes announced his decision. All charges against Jake Martinez and his associates are dropped. Furthermore, they are being recognized for humanitarian service to the station and to human-alien relations. The room erupted in applause. Jake looked stunned. His friends hugged him and even Commander Ross was smiling. But Captain Hayes wasn't finished. The Colonial Council is also announcing new policies. We will create better systems to track all prisoners and refugees so that no one can be forgotten again. We will establish an interspecies advocacy office to help aliens who need assistance in human space. He looked at Lyra. "Ms. Kethler, you and your son are being granted full citizenship in human space. You may choose to live on any human world or station." Lyra stood up again, tears in her bright eyes. "I choose stay here on Station Nexus 7. This is where Jake friends are. This is where Nix learn human words. This is home now." Dr. Grant spoke. "Up. Commander Ross, I would like to offer Lyra a position in our research department. Her knowledge of atmospheric systems could help us improve life support throughout the station." Commander Ross nodded. "Dr. Grant, I think that's an excellent idea." Over the following months, life on Station Nexus 7 changed in wonderful ways. Lyra became Dr. Grant's research partner, using her scientific knowledge to help design better air and water systems. Her first published research paper was dedicated to the humans who proved that kindness crosses all boundaries between species. Nick started attending Susan Walsh's school with the other children on the station. He was a quick learner who loved math and science like his mother. The other children were curious about his blue-silver skin and large eyes at first, but soon they were just playing together like any group of friends. Jake went back to his maintenance work, but now his job was different. Lyra often worked with him on projects, showing him new ways to fix problems with the station's systems. Her scientific knowledge combined with his practical skills made them a great team. The station also began receiving visits from other Zephyrians as part of new cultural exchange programs. Scientists and artists came to share knowledge and ideas. Children from both species learned about each other's worlds and cultures. One evening, 6 months after the hearing, Jake was working in the lower levels of the station when he heard familiar voices. He followed the sound and found Lyra and Nyx in the old detention block. They were showing a group of human and Zephyrian children the cell where they had been imprisoned. "This was our home for 3 years," Lyra was telling them. "Very cold, very sad. But Jake friend found us here. He showed us that even in darkest place, kindness can make light." Nyx, now bigger and stronger, added in perfect human words, "My Jack friend saved us. He showed that humans are good people who help when they see someone who needs help." The children asked many questions about what it was like to live in the cold cell and how Jake had helped them. Lyra answered all their questions honestly but kindly. As Jake listened from the hallway, he thought about how much had changed. The story that had started with one man finding 2 forgotten people had grown into something much bigger. It had reminded humans throughout the galaxy about their best values. It had helped 2 different species understand each other better. But for Jake, the most important change was simpler. He was no longer alone. He had a family now, not just Lyra and Nyx, but all the friends who had helped him save them. Danny still worked in communications, but now he also helped coordinate the new cultural exchange programs. Susan taught her classes, but now she had students from 2 different species. Ben continued his medical work, but now he was also studying Zephyrian biology. Amy kept managing data systems, but now she also helped process applications from aliens who wanted to live in human space. Dr. Grant had become like a grandmother to Nyx, teaching him about science and medicine. Even Commander Ross would sometimes visit to see how the boy was doing in school. As Jake walked home that evening, he passed through the busy central area of the station. Human families and Zephyrian visitors were eating together in restaurants. Children from both species played together in the parks. Scientists and engineers from different worlds worked together on projects. It was late, and Jake was tired, but he felt happy. He had learned something important over the past months. Sometimes the biggest changes in the galaxy start with the smallest acts of kindness. Sometimes saving 2 people can end up saving the idea of what it means to be human. When Jake reached his apartment, he found Lyra and Nyx waiting for him with dinner. Nyx ran to hug him, speaking in the mix of Zephyrian and human words that had become normal in their little family. "Jack friend, Mama made your favorite food." Lyra smiled at Jake with the bright, warm expression that had replaced the fear and sadness in her eyes. "Thank you for finding us," she said, as she did almost every day. Jake hugged them both. "Thank you for letting me help," he replied, as he always did. Outside their window, ships from many different worlds came and went from Station Nexus 7, but inside their apartment, a hum